Hi, everyone. Welcome to Riot's Lunch and Learn series. You found us the place where we feature all of Riot's partners. I am super excited to have AEM Group and Swissbit with us today. Just a couple of quick reminders before I hand it over to Ed Bray with AEM Group to get us kicked off. This session is being recorded. It will be posted to Riot's YouTube channel and then shared out via the meetup group where you registered for this event. So you'll be able to watch it afterwards. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, this is going to be a pretty interactive session. So please make sure to drop all your questions in the chat box and we'll get as many of those answered during the presentation as possible. And another quick reminder, just to keep yourself muted throughout the presentation, and we will, if we have time at the end, allow you to unmute yourself and ask questions live. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to Ed, who will then hand it over to Swissbit. Thank you so much for being with us today, y'all.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you guys for joining us. We really appreciate it. I wanted to introduce Nick Gifford, the Regional Sales Manager for Swissbit, as well as Ryan Hathaway, Technical Sales Engineer. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nick.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Caroline. Just wanted to say a quick hello to everybody. As Ed mentioned, I'm the Regional Sales Manager for Swissbit, responsible for the East Coast, Canada, and South Central. And just want to say thank you for joining, and let us know if you have any questions, and don't hesitate to reach out. With that, I'll hand it over to Ryan.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks everybody for the time. Thank you for the group setting up. Really appreciate it. Appreciate being able to being here. So as everybody said, we want this to be interactive as possible. Please feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Any feedback, positive, negative, we're very interested. With that being said, jumping right in, we'll talk a little bit about Swissbit, who we are, and what we do as far as the IoT solution world. So quick history on Swissbit. The name comes from, we are headquartered in Switzerland. And for the past 20 years or so, we've been a memory company. So the bit is for memory. So Swissbit. We have a long history with industrial memory. We don't make the parts that you see buying in stores or Best Buy, USB, SD, micro SD card. We make a lot of the same products, but we make them for industrial use. Okay. With that being said, with the last 7 or 8 years, we've moved in those form factors into the security world. And that's the kind of vein that we're going to present with here today. So our agenda here today, and again, if anybody has anything they would like to hear more about, we're certainly interested in doing that as well. Quick introduction to company. We started to get into that a little bit. Swissbit, who we are, what we do. Then we are going to talk a little bit about our security cards. So these are SD, micro SD cards, and USB sticks with various levels of security protection that basically can secure data and turn devices into secure devices. Next, we can move into our Secure Boot Raspberry Pi version. This is designed specifically for Raspberry Pi single board computers with the idea of being secure boot. Secure boot, for anybody that doesn't know, is basically a way of signing firmware to make sure that when a device boots, that the firmware is the correct firmware loaded, that it hasn't been previously hacked. Next, we'll talk a little bit about our iShield camera card, secure video, photo recording, data recording. And the idea behind this is to keep using a micro SD card to keep pictures and videos secure, safe from hacking. Next, we'll talk a little bit about our FIDO2 iShield FIDO2 stick. For anybody that's not familiar with FIDO2, that stands for Fast Identity Online. It's an industry standard. This stick is designed to replace password for web authentication and universal second factor. And this is a relatively new product for us. Product launch is coming up shortly. And lastly, we'll end with another new product for us, but what we're calling our Iot Secure Connect. And the idea behind this is, in the world of IoT, not just keeping data secure, but keeping the pathways and access to those data secure. So the vision and mission of Swissbit, again, you see here some company logo, but it's store, secure, trust. For 20+ years, we've been in the industrial memory storage world We have a long history there. We're the only European manufacturer making our own parts out of Europe for industrial memory. Secure, this is one of the reasons we're here today. For 7 or 8 years, we've been into the security world using our devices to secure data and secure devices. And trust, so not only going into our store and secure world, but trust in our quality manufacturing, lock bomb process, PCN, quality processing. So the competence we deliver, right? So here is our Swissbit corporate portfolio. We have basically 4 different divisions under the Swissbit. So the first being our memory solutions team. This has been our bread and butter for 20 plus years. We're the service memory company. Next is our controller division, manufactured by Hypersone, also based out of Germany. So our manufacturing, I should say our manufacturing is out of Germany, even though our headquarters are in Switzerland. Our control division of Hypersone is also out of Germany. The next division, the one we're most apropos to what we're talking about today, is our embedded IoT solutions. So security products, secure firmware, secure software, and wireless security as well. And lastly, our advanced packaging, assembly, and test solutions. We have the ability in our factory to provide not just the normal form factors that we're familiar with, such as an SD card, micro SD card, USB, but because we do all of our own manufacturing at the wafer level, we can provide custom solutions, custom form factors. We can also do things like logoing, custom logoing for corporate logos. So we have a lot of different capabilities in that division as well. So a little bit more about the Swissbit security, right? Who we are, what we do. Well, first of all, we're trying to protect what matters, right? Data security is a top priority for all CIOs, right? This is no surprise to anybody here. Security spending to reach 3.1 billion with a B dollars by 2021. And as the market evolves, the increasing complexity of the devices connected in IoT, that's great, more features, more capabilities of these products, but it also means more complicated secure networks, right? The security risks are also more sophisticated. 70% by some research we've seen of IoT devices are vulnerable to attack. Okay, so our mission is to protect those devices, protect the data. Okay, and again, we have over 20 years of experience with data storage, over 10 years in our security and protect data and services. The security threats we are, I think everybody's aware of that hackers leaking 15 million accounts, colossal cyber attacks, IP, ransomware. These are the security threats we all face. And these are ones that are pulled from the headlines of news, but I think as we all know, most security threats probably don't make the news, right? There's much more. This is a tip of an iceberg as far as the security threats that are out there. It's financial, it's reputational, it's IP, it's safety as well. These are the kind of threats we're seeing from security. The kind of threats that we are trying to alleviate. So we're embedded IoT solutions. We're securing what matters. How are we doing that? Basically 3 different ways. We're securing the actual data, right? To keep the data safe. And there's a lot of different ways these are done, but these are the basic umbrellas, right? We're securing the communication of that data, right? It's not just to have the data stored being safe, but the data in flight needs to be safe as well. And we're securing the IoT devices as well. Okay, the device security part of that. And we can answer all 3 of these challenges in different ways. The applications where we serve, right, are kind of the markets we are into. Okay, some of these we have a very long history with, some of them are newer to us, but manufacturing, industrial, Internet of Things, this is one that's a very prominent market for us, somewhere we're into quite a bit. Smart infrastructure, netcom and mobile communications, this is very much emerging in the IoT and security threat world. Surveillance cameras, for example. Point of sale, this is another huge success for Swissbit. Basically, if you can imagine a point of sale device, a cash register, it's important not only to keep that data secure, but to keep that data auditable, meaning it can't be hacked or manipulated. right? So if you can imagine, not only in this case, it's not only in the interest of the user to keep the data secure, but it's in the interest of keeping the user from accessing or manipulating that data, right? Imagine for tax purposes in an example of point of sale. Medical devices, extremely important in the American market, not just for safety, but also for liability. Medical devices, right? Most of this information, any kind of patient information, is protected by law. Mobility solutions, and the example you see here is an autonomous car or an EV car, very much using IoT devices and very much a concern for hacking. And smart building, smart home, including things like smart factories, smart office parks. And we say smart, there's some sort of level of control with IoT. And smart home, I think something we're all familiar with. Our devices, anything from our doorbell to our dishwasher and our refrigerators have to have Twitter now. So there's comes to be security threats that go along with that. So the security, a little bit more about the security solutions we provide. They come in kind of 3 buckets, as we said. But we have security products, right? So these are SD or micro SD cards. This is a USB nano stick. Here you see an eMMC security device. And here you see a little bit more of a custom device in a different form factor, right? These devices have different levels of security, anything from just firmware that is secured to different hardware components up to secure element components. Okay, so these use standard interfaces. They're removable, possible to be removable if that's desired. Also possible to be embedded if that's the desired solution, right? You don't want a part to be removed for security reasons, right? And we see from our customers, we see that different desires in that world, right? Some customers want the removable, right? So you can take an SD card or a USB stick, plug it into a device and make it into a secure device. That's the socket part is very attractive to them. The other, we see other customers that prefer kind of the embedded solution where they don't want the device to be able to be removed and taken by a bad actor, for example. Some of the other services we provide, and usually these go somewhat hand in hand, right? One uses the other, right? They're not independent solutions. But a software development kit, a lot of times for a host system. There's a lot of examples for that, but an easy example is for our Raspberry Pi Secure Boot. We provide a software development kit, which allows users to kind of manipulate the source code as they desire for different kinds of solutions in Raspberry Pi or different kinds of uses with the Raspberry Pi computer, right? The use cases can be very similar, but the actual application can be much different. Another example is in our Iot Secure Connect. As you can imagine, if you have an employee working at home who's accessing something in a smart factory, there's a lot of different ways of accessing, right? So we provide software development kit to work with those different kinds of ways. And then services, anything from customization of parts or form factors, certificate loading, certificate application. And again, all done in a very experienced factory with a lot of different quality certifications to go along with that to back that up. So let's talk a little bit about the security additions that we have, right? And these particular two, again, are SD, micro SD card, and USB. So the first solution would be just what we call our data protection or DP variety. This is basically a standard US micro SD or SD card standard memory product with secure firmware and some sort of encryption, right? So the firmware is different, but the card itself is very much the same. Okay. With that, you can do things like encryption. There's a whole list of features that can go along with that. Okay. So that's with an AES controller and secure firmware. Okay. Our standard edition and our premium edition use an AES controller, secure firmware, but they also use security chips. So a secure element, right? Similar to the secure element you would have in your credit card, or most of us have in a passport or something like that, right? And the secure element provides different features. So you can do different things with the secure element that you could not do without it, but also an additional level of security, right? So your secret or your root of trust is not just in a controller, but it's in actually a secure element, which is much more difficult to access, hack, physically hack, those type of things, right? But there's different features that go along with that. And the difference between the standard edition and the premium edition, the standard edition has the secure element. The premium edition is basically the standard edition plus the data protection as well. Okay. The nice things about this, they're easy to integrate, right? There's not a lot of heavy lifting on a customer side, and they're retrofittable, right? So a lot of times you see a security problem that happens maybe after a product launch, a product that's been in the field for 2 or 3 years. If you already have one of these very common interfaces, you can take one of our cards, one of our devices, and retrofit your security, which is a very nice feature. And there we see some pictures of our different devices here, different form factors. So a little bit more about the data protection, right? This is the one with no secure element. It's basically a standard card with an AES controller and secure firmware as well, right? So security firmware, you protect access of a data partition. You have encryption of a data partition, right? CD-ROM partition basically means like a write once, read many type of idea. You can also have a hidden partition, right? So this partition is invisible to a host, but it can be programmed before it goes on the field. Secure boot, and again, what secure boot is when a device is booted, if it has secure boot on it, that device does a firmware check to make sure the correct firmware is loaded. If the correct firmware is not loaded, the device will not give you access, right? So a lot of times when we think about hacking, it's when the device is already on. But if the device can be manipulated to use some sort of operating system or bootable memory before, or as it's being powered on, that can be a security concern as well. So other counterfeit protections as well. Micro SD and SD card especially have a lot of concerns as far as counterfeiting, which can result in liability. So these are some of the features with our data protection card, our DP card, so-called. So just a quick visual on kind of how a DP solution can work, right? You can have, for example, a boot partition, which is read-only, right? Cannot write to this boot partition, can't access it. Okay, you can have an OS partition, operating system partition, which is read-only and pin protected. You can have a private data partition, right? So there's different use cases for different types of partition, but it's read-write. So you can write to this partition, but it's also pin protected. And then you can actually have something which is basically a hidden partition, right? So it's on the physical memory storage, but not visible to the host in any way. And that's useful for something like a flight data recorder, right? Or audit trails, right? So it's hidden data. It can be loaded before it's deployed to the field, and then nobody can ever gain access to it. It's not part of visible storage. And so here's a little bit of an overview of what the DP card looks like, right? There's our flash memory, which is, again, it's very similar to an SD card or micro SD card in industrial features. There's security firmware, it's part of that in the controller. And then there's an encryptor engine as well. There's the micro SD card pins. Okay, the flash controller with an AES unit, the storage is protected, access is protected. So next, we'll give a little overview of our premium edition. So the DP, which we previously talked about, the data protection, is basically security firmware and an AES controller. The premium edition includes those, but also has a secure element. So all of the features that we talked about with a data protection card, but also things like signed worm entry. So write once, read many, and when you're signed, it means it's been verified in some way. Data signature and encryption, possibility for TPM functionality, voice and data stream encryption, right? So actually, we call this our Merkle phone, but this was a voice encryption. hash chain protected audit trails and dual use product as well. And then we have this for the DP card. The PE card looks a little bit different, right? So there's the flash memory, there's our controller, there's the firmware, but there's also the secure element part of this, right? And I should say that the card can communicate in two different ways. One is either through the secure element, right, or through the normal SD bus, right? So the security enabled by Swissbit, and then the standard memory access as well. So a little bit different, gives you a trust anchor, secure feature upgrade, upload, and device authentication. So more features and a deeper root of trust. There's a secure element here, communication. So some use cases, where are we using these cards already? So here's one as far as IP and license monetization or protection. So basically you can think of it as maybe creating an app store using, this is an example of a industrial PLC, right? You want to make sure that these licenses are not manipulated, that the IP is safe, and that you can monetize this, right? So it's a retrofit security, mass storage in a standard interface, no hardware change required. And we can do side audit trails, write once, read many, but it protects the license, IP, and revenue streams of PLC or industrial customer. Another use case, so this is data protection in a different form factor. This is an M12 USB stick, but it's an ultra small security USB stick, configuration data, license control in a USB-C format. But this is just an idea of kind of the custom form factoring that we can do. This is use case as far as a mobile, and this is what was called our VE or voice edition, right? So voice communication over mobile networks or internet is not secure. So this does on-the-fly encryption, real-time, no impact on voice quality, strong end user authentication, and flexible use for mobile phones as well. And another one, this is a netcom solution, right? So this is embedded USB, eUSB, so-called. This is probably maybe a form factor people are less familiar with, but this was before USB interface. There's this embedded USB interface, right? And you can do things like create a boot partition. So the only point of this partition is to boot the device, protected against manipulation. You can have an image that's protected against IP theft. In a kind of industrial netcom world, which can be a very robust, challenging world, right? A lot of data being written and read. Temperatures physically can be a tough environment. And then lastly, a smart infrastructure, right? The problem is you have no protection against reverse engineering, it's protection of IP. You can take a standard card or USB and protect it against these type of things, right? And this is really, as far as reverse engineering or IP protection, this is kind of true across a lot of different markets as well. And here's a medical device, for example, right? In the challenge of a lot of medical is that the patient data has to be protected, right? According to a lot of regulations in the United States, right? So here you have example, patient card possible with maybe secure element or without a secure element. Role separation, right? So employees, there's different levels of access with different either passwords or non-passwords, right? A unique ID of the recorded data. So basically almost like a hashing, it's audible security interface mechanism. So these are some of the use cases we've had for our security products. Okay. So that was in summary of our data protection, micro SD, SD cards, and USBs. Moving to our next solution, which is a plug and play solution. Two here that we have our iShield and we have our U-Boot. Okay, I'm just going to excuse me. So this is our secure boot solution for Raspberry Pi. Right, so you can take a micro SD card, a Raspberry Pi edition, and you can protect data, protect access to the data, encrypt the data, And then also use secure boot solution, right? So again, secure boot being that when the device boots up, there is a check that makes sure that the operating system or firmware being booted is the correct one and hasn't been manipulated or hacked in any way. There we go. So, three different maybe policies or varieties. I won't go into agonizing detail, but you can have something as easy as a PIN input, where you have a password, and without that password, you can't access the device. You can have an authentication dongle. Basically, you still have a micro SD for data protection, access protection. But if there's not a separate USB stick plugged in, then the authentication does not take place, right? This is your password replacement. And then you can also do authentication through a network server, remote authentication network. So it's a PIN or USB or a net policies as well. Next, we'll talk about our iShield secure video and photo recording. Okay, and what this is, the use cases we're talking about here are things like drone cameras, body cameras, photo cameras, action cameras, dash cam, right? With the challenge being this data, these pictures and videos, when they're recorded, making sure that they're secure. So you take the example of a drone camera that's flying around, either doing monitoring or security. This drone camera crashes. If a bad actor gains access to this micro SD card or the memory, can they access the data? Normally they can. If they have an iShield camera card, they cannot. Right. Another, for example, a body camera, which is worn by either a government worker, police officer, right? Well, one thing you want to make sure is if somebody gains access to the body camera, not only can they not access it, they cannot manipulate it, they cannot access it as well. And that's the case with the iShield camera card, right? And there's role separation. The user as well cannot manipulate the data, right? And again, you can imagine a lot of these, for a dash cam example, if you have a security application, right? If somebody's in an at-fault accident, you don't want them to be able to destroy or manipulate the data, right? So it's also protecting users as well. So here's, a little bit more about a body cam, right? The micro SD card retrofits any kind of body camera, no change required on the camera firmware and hardware. It's basically plug and play, and it alleviates the risk of unauthorized data access, manipulation, or data loss. Okay, and here's an example, right, of a role separation. So a police officer could only record video, and only a designated person, a chief, a judge, can view and delete the data. Okay, and that's just an example of the type of application that type of flavor of security that we're providing. Another possible use case, this is one we're really trying to push, is drone cameras, right? And again, it's retrofittable, it's plug and play, data protection, encryption. There's a lot of different applications just within the drone world, but there's a lot of government military type applications or security type applications, right? Drones are now being used more and more to monitor facilities or any kind of protection. Also in monitoring, for example, used to monitor power lines, right? To check a power line. Instead of sending a crew out, you can use a drone to kind of do a kind of monitoring of that. And again, the advantage of our iShield camera card, the Swissbit iShield camera card, protects against unauthorized data access, manipulation, and data loss. And again, I should say, in the case of something like a drone, you want the card to be physically robust, right? You want the memory to be physically robust, which you'll get with Swissbit. So the next application I'll go into is our so-called FIDO2, iShield FIDO2 solution. So what this is, well, before I get into it, the iShield FIDO2 is basically for web authentication and universal second factor. Okay, so what's the problem we're talking about iShield FIDO2? We're protecting against password issues, right? And when we think of a lot of time of hacking, we're thinking of sophisticated computer hacks, but a lot of times it's a human error issue, right? And so what's the problem with passwords, right? Passwords are used across multiple accounts, right? The password you use for your coupon card at grocery store is the same password you use for your bank, right? A password is reused, right? not only is it used across multiple accounts, but you're using different passwords for different accounts as well. A password is shared, right? This is, people are either, John from accounting gets an email from halfway around the world saying, please send me your password, and John does that, right? And now you have a hack, now you have a security threat, okay? More common than phishing attacks, more common than we like to admit. Or you imagine the industrial world, if you have a PLC, a lot of times, or a locked workstation, a password protected workstation, a lot of times those passwords are just attached in a sticky note right on the HMI, right? So the password is shared with the hacking concern. A password's often forgotten, and I think something with the work from home, this is probably a headache for IT departments in a big way, but also security risk, right? Typing a password, especially multiple accounts multiple times a day, can be very time consuming as well, right? So the security things we get, and the other thing is a password is much too easy to guess, right? So if you imagine a spray attack, which is a hacker trying a simple password across thousands or multiples of accounts, and eventually they'll get to that easy password. Somebody's used the password 1234 or used password, right? So the security issues, phishing attacks, session hacking, brute force attacks, lack word password complexity. Thank you. And these can lead to huge amounts of security threats and hacks. So this is our iShield FIDO2 stick, and this stick attempts to solve that problem, right? So it's a hardware-based authentication. Instead of typing a password or using a password to access account, you plug in this is a USB-A in this particular one, but you plug in your authentication stick, and this acts as your password, right? This acts as your authentication. It could be a first pass authentication, but also can be a second factor authentication as well. So it's simple, secure, it's flexible. Anywhere you have a workstation, you should be able to use this. And a hardware solution is always going to be much safer than a software solution. And again, if you imagine our example, John from accounting is sharing his password in phishing, right? He emails his password halfway across the world, and now it's hacked. In this case, he can't email a USB stick, right? You can't propagate this throughout a system, right? So if you can't recreate this with a USB stick. Okay, and I should say the iShield is our security branding, but the FIDO, we're a member of the FIDO Alliance. This is an industry standard. Again, stands for Fast Identity Online. So the reason, again, part of the reason for protecting the online accounts, it's a simple solution, it's a secure solution, and it's flexible, right? You can work with any kind of FIDO compatible services, which there are hundreds of them already out there, with no, basically it's a 5 or 10 minute setup process. All you do is pair your USB stick to whatever account you're trying to access, and then you're away and going. There's no software development on the customer side, no software development on whatever kind of account you're trying to access. And I should say it's reusable across multiple accounts as well. So for example, you have somebody working from home, they can use this with very little setup. They can use this iShield FIDO2 to access most of VPNs, CRMs, Salesforce, email, and any kind of other accounts or servers that you have, right? And these services, because it's using an industry standard, are already set up with those kinds of access. The security, it's both a public and private key cryptography, durable security key, fully molded, robust, water-resistant housing. And I should say, so in this case, we're seeing our standard product, which has our Secured by Swissbit logo on it. But it is possible for if there's enough products that we can relabel this or recolor this with any kind of corporate logo, imaging, what have you. We have the ability to do that in-house. We can do that kind of custom work. Also has tap and go authentication with NFC for mobile devices, touch authentication for USB-A, and again, it works with a wide range of operating systems and browsers. Okay. So again, the reason what the problems we're trying to solve here, right? Passwords are both poor in usability right? You have to make up either a random password or you forget your password. You have to change your password. It's time consuming and it's weak as far as security. A PIN, much easier to use, but also very weak in security. Okay. A one-time password or a hardware token, for example, strong in security, but poor in usability, right? FIDO alleviates all those, right? Easy to use, strong security, retrofittable, ready to use right out of the box, pretty much. So here, yeah, here's a little bit more about our custom form factor and branding. This shows the USB form factor, but we can do custom form factors as well. We can do different customers, names, logos, anything like that, and all because we have our own kind of industrial manufacturing capabilities. So last thing we want to talk about is protecting data devices in the IoT. So this is not just data protection, but also secure channel protection as well. So this is it's a newer product for us, but it's something we're pretty excited about. So we're calling it Iot Secure Connect. Add security with ease, enable secure maintenance, monitoring, control, and remotely connected IoT systems. Okay, so what are the type of cybersecurity risks in an IoT system, right? It's me. This is something probably all of our users may be already aware of, but information is interrupted because there's no insight to critical operations. Information is manipulated, leading to wrong decisions, right? Here, data, which needs to go both ways, is snooped. You have a breach of confidentiality. You have exposure of business secrets, right? And IP, something is becoming extremely important. Always been important to customers, but becoming even more so. You have interrupted going the other way. You have a loss of control. If data is manipulated this way, you have a loss of transparency. So these are the kind of problems that we are trying to solve with our Iot Secure Connect. So the value we create, right? The Swissbit Iot Secure Connect provides a root of trust in every IoT system, a hardware-based root of trust. So you can use it with different network architectures, securely connecting IoT devices. And it's very adaptable, right? When we talk about IoT, that's a big world. There's a lot of different applications, a lot of different solutions, from something you have in your home to something that's in an autonomous car to something that's in a smart factory, smart building, right? And it's an adaptable solution to protect those pathways. The system we're enabling is simple, low cost, and pretty much ready to use with no development, but little development on the user end. So what are we providing as part of this Iot Secure Connect? First, we're providing the software, right? Licensing for all different users or even third-party users, right? And this is connector plugin. This is adaptable to use with many different access points already, team viewer, whatever have you, whatever the particular use case happens to be. And you can see the kind of platforms supported: x86, ARM, embedded, Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, right? It's made to be as adaptable as possible to what the customer needs are. And then the hardware part of this, and there's other solutions out there for keeping IoT pathways secure using software. The difference between this solution is that the root of trust is hardware based, right? And you can have something like a secure element. So these are industrial memory modules, salable security with secure element, different kind of certificates of security. And it's a pluggable option, ideal for retrofit IoT systems, right? And if your secret is stored either in your software, your root of trust is either in your software or it's in your controller, the data point may be, the data pathway may be secure, but the password is not. So you're building this amazingly secure safe, but then you're storing the key to the safe in the public square. Okay. In this case, you're securing both, not just the safe. You're not just building a good safe for data protection, but you're protecting the key as well. And lastly, services where we can manage the root of trust, we can manage licensing, we can identify the providers, and we can do in-field activation as well. So here's an example. This is an example of a smart factory. And on the left side, you have a company or a factory with different divisions, with a gateway and a controller accessing or controlling all sorts of secure devices, right? Or sorry, devices, I should say, at the top. Robotics, monitoring, machines. You have an employee who's either in his cube or working from home, who's remote, using the internet to access the gateway and access all of these different machines. Maybe a service partner is doing this as well with a service desk, okay? This is how this is a typical, and the key is not just that the data is secure, but these pathways are secure, right? You don't want somebody posing as an employee, gaining access to your factory and either stealing your data, your IP, taking control of your factory line, shutting down your factory line with either ransomware or industrial attack. So this is the kind of solution that Swissbit can provide with our Iot Secure Connect. There's a hardware-based root of trust, right, with the secure element based in either the controller, can be based in the gateway as well. There's our Iot Secure Connect software based in your controller, and then your employees all have a software package as well. And again, this is made to be adaptable and flexible. And then we can also have your service partners, your service workers with secure software as well, and services as part of this, right? So you're securing not just the data, but you can see in the blue lines, the secured pathways as well, okay? And this is just an example of one way they can work with it, but we're establishing secure channels for access to protect the IoT system. Another quick example, this is an IT help desk. So you have, again, you have hardware secure channels, either in the workstation, office PC, possibly with remote access using our software as well, the network system administration, and then you have your service partner at home, remote access. In an additional level of security, you can also use our iShield FIDO2 to do the authentication, right? To make sure that the authentication is a hardware-based authentication. You don't have a hack or a bad actor gaining access to this as well. And services possible as well to provide authorized access, so you can have administrative level access as well, in addition to maybe a service partner. So the benefits of a fully secure system: fully qualified, reliable modules, reduced time to market. It's a fast entry to security. If you're not in the entry, it's easy to retrofit. Zero trust concept for its network. The connected IoT devices are very easy to manage. It's adaptable and flexible for network architecture. In this case, our customers keep full control, and it's easy to update, and again, part of the management as well. So with that, just in summary, before we open the forum, we talked about Swissbit for 10 years has been in the IoT security world. We provide SD, micro SD cards, USB cards, or memory modules that can secure data and use common interfaces to make secure devices. We talked about our secure boot Raspberry Pi solution designed specifically for Raspberry Pi computers, where you can protect data access, data protection, so the data is encrypted as well. And also with secure boot, you can make sure that the firmware or operating system that's being booted is the correct one as well. We talked about our iShield camera card, which is designed to keep picture and video recording secure for things like body cameras, drone cameras, dash cameras, insurance cameras. We talked about our iShield FIDO2 stick, which provides authentication, web authentication, and password replacement. And lastly, we talked about our Iot Secure Connect, which is about providing secure pathways in the world of IoT. So with that being said, we're like to open the forum for any questions, comments, any kind of feedback, positive or negative. We're happy to hear.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ryan. I do see one question in the chat box to get us kicked off. How does Swissbit handle physical security and achieve secure boot on a Raspberry Pi?
So let's go back to our secure boot solution here. can, there we go. So, in this case, it's a micro SD card plugged into the Raspberry Pi, right? And this is our DP card, which means no secure element. Okay. But the data is still encrypted on the micro SD card. Okay, it's part of the controller. It's possible to, so there's the data protection, right? It's encrypted data that's password protected. The access protection, and again, the same thing. You can have password protection basically to prevent any kind of access to the Raspberry Pi. But as far as the particular secure boot solution, what happens, and there's a little bit of development that goes part of this, is you can basically have whatever your operating system is, as part of working with our micro SD card. There's a hashing or a check that's run every single time that a boot is done, right? So whenever the Raspberry Pi computer boots on, there's a check that's done. The check is done with the micro SD card to make sure that the operating system is the correct one. And there's different levels of that, right? And that's part of the next slide here, right? It can be something like a PIN, right, where it's password protected. It can be something like an authentication, where if this USB stick is not plugged into the Raspberry Pi, it won't work regardless, even if you have a PIN. And then it can also be done through a network server. And even within the network server, it can be configured to be a password protection or not. So it's basically to think of it as mating the system with the micro SD card through the Raspberry Pi. So every time that there is a boot, there's some sort of verification process that goes with the operating system and the micro SD card.
Very helpful. Thanks, Ryan.
Sure.
As Ryan mentioned, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions in real time, or you can utilize the chat box. Brian, if people think of questions afterwards, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Sure. Well, I'm always available. My email is ryan.hathaway, HATHAWAY @swissbit.com. But they can also access our website, has a support email as well. They can access through that as well. But they can feel free to send me email at any time. We're always looking for questions and feedback.
Lovely. And
I'll
Ed
put mine
dropped
up
his
there
as
as
well.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks so much, Ed.
Sure. Thanks, Ed.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave it open for another minute, but as a reminder, this was recorded, so you'll be able to find it on Riot's YouTube channel and the meetup group where you registered for this event. So you'll be able to go back and access this wonderful information. All right, I am not seeing any more questions. So again, please reach out to Ryan or Ed, or visit the Swissbit or AEM websites. If you think of additional questions, you can also always reach out to me, Caroline@riot.org, and I'll connect you directly. I hope to see you at next week's Lunch and Learn, and we'll definitely see Ed and his team again, and hopefully the Swissbit team again. So thank you all very much. Stay safe out there. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.